Hey, hello. Welcome to a new week, everyone. I'm Dave Russell from Veeam Software, and we are joined 2 weeks in a row by a very special guest. In this case, it is Calvin Zito, aka Storage Godfather from Hewlett Packard Enterprise. Calvin, how are you today?
Buongiorno a tutti. I'm doing great, Dave. How are you?
I am good. So we are representing, I guess, the mountain time zone. You're in Boise. I'm in Colorado at the moment. And Calvin's dog will also be kicking questions in the background there, blending into the chair. So the tough questions are aimed at the pets. Between Calvin and myself, we have 3 dogs actually. So we have entitled this All Things Storage Without a Script, meaning when Calvin and I got to chatting about what could we talk about? And we actually said, well, we've got what, 67, 68 years between us of IT experience, and we'll get to that in a second, but roughly 7 decades. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about, would be it storage in general, backup in particular, HPE in particular, Veeam in particular. But what we wanted to do is take your questions. One of the beauties of a live stream, in addition to you never know what's going to happen, is that we get to interact more. So do encourage you in the comments section in the LinkedIn live stream, please enter in your questions. We'd be happy to address them. If we don't get to them, I'll try to make sure to get back in the comments section a little bit later. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to know Calvin a little bit for those that may not know him. I think we've got a slide on that, and you can kind of walk us through that.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this, Dave. This is great, although I feel a little overwhelmed that I guess I'm kind of a stand-in for J-Buff, and I'm not sure how I can possibly follow him, but I'll give it my best shot.
Oh, absolutely. He does great work. I should tell everyone, Jason Buffington, he's going to be back next Monday. He's got time off for good behavior, getting some much needed R&R. But no, don't sell yourself short. We're very fortunate to have you, Calvin.
Well, as you said, I've been, I guess between the two of us, we've been around the industry a long, long time. I actually started with HP right out of college as a field engineer. I was kind of break, fix, install guy. And then in about 1990, decided I got tired of breathing toner through my nose and seeing that stuff coming out when I blew my nose afterwards, and decided I probably should do something a little different. So I made the move into HP storage at the time, of course, HPE storage, and have been there since about 1990.
All in Boise, or did you go to various locales?
No, I've been in Boise the whole time. There was a little brief stint where I decided I wanted to try something different, and I went down to Colorado Springs for about 18 months. Okay. About the week after I got there was a snowstorm that dumped about 3 feet of snow, covered our front door to the very top, and decided I don't like this. So I started looking, going back to Boise, and went back to Boise as soon as I could.
Gotcha. So I do want to point out, you've got a blog as well. And our colleague Christian's going to drop that in the comment section, at some point here. Thank you so much, Christian. Christian actually pinged me to remind me, hey, don't forget to mention Calvin's blog. Now, just take us through that a little bit. You've got a podcast, you've got a blog. You are essentially a full-time communicator, blogger, podcaster, etc., evangelist, really. So you've got a number of different mechanisms. I guess I'd be remiss before we get to our first external question if I didn't ask. That was pretty early stage stuff, right? I mean, you were truly a pioneer. We were just chatting with Mark, our producer. He's been doing these live streams now, I think it was 16 years. So you guys have been kind of at the forefront of this. How did that come to be? How did HP or HPE say, yeah, let's do that?
It was actually, it's kind of actually an interesting story. At the time, I was kind of leading what we did across marketing communications. So I worked with analyst relations and you back in those days, and PR and our web and brochures and just everything that we did across marketing communications. But it was kind of in a group that was outside of storage, even though I was 100% focused on storage. And the storage team, not because of me specifically, but just because of the way the organization worked, they said, we want control of that money that you guys are spending. And I went from having about $450,000 a quarter to having nothing. And wow. It made me start to think, okay, how do I deliver value when I don't have any budget to spend and I'm going to have to go tin cup to do stuff? And at the time, one of our competitors, the Evil Machine Company, had probably, I think, 6 VPs that were all blogging. And we had a VP that had written 1 blog in about 6 months. And I just decided, okay, I think one of the ways I could add value is take over the blog. Initially, I didn't want to be the guy writing all the blogs. Figured I got to get other people to do this because I'm kind of a generalist within our organization. I'm not deep in anything. I know a little about a lot, but just couldn't get people to like engage in blogging back then because everybody was like, no, my customers read a brochure when they're on an airplane and they don't want to read blogs. And I just basically took it upon myself and started blogging myself. That was about 12 years ago. And yeah, ever since then, I just kept finding ways to expand what I did. Started doing the podcast, started doing videos. People know me for the chalk talks that I do, which is the handwriting on the board. And it actually was some work, Dave, getting people to accept that this thing, social media, is really compelling. I remember our manager asking me, "Is like, does anybody really care what you had for lunch on Twitter?" And I basically had been like tracking links that came back to hp.com at the time and went and showed them how many people a month were coming back to our website because of stuff that I was putting out there. And they were like, "Oh, okay, I get it. You can keep doing that. And you can tell them what you had for lunch if you want."
Awesome. We already do have a first question. It comes from, I believe it's Mehdi, who asks, hello, everyone. How can we get rid of VMware VM snapshot-based backups? So I'll take that one, and certainly jump in, Calvin, if you have some comments as well. But in version 10 for Veeam Backup and Replication that came out in February, we did introduce something we call snapshotless backups. It sounds a little confusing when we say snapshotless. What it means is not using VMware's snapshot facility, but rather using the snapshot of third-party storage array providers such as Hewlett-Packard Enterprise and their full portfolio of solutions. So we let the metal, the underlying storage platform that is very good about capturing data, moving data, take that task, and then we layer in Veeam Backup and Replication as a management control construct to help orchestrate and call those commands for the underlying array. That removes the so-called VM stun, or in some cases, you've got a size limitation. In some cases, you've got an application operating system that doesn't play particularly well with that kind of a construct. And Mehdi's on a roll, so let's make sure we get to this one too. Asking another question, what about vVols-based VMs? Specifically, when we are intending to do a replication? Short answer is I'm going to have to look on vVols and replicating that without doing a VMware snap. So I will get back to you, Mehdi, on that, but keep the questions coming, and everyone else keep the questions coming as well. So if I return back, Calvin, certainly 2020 has not been a year like any of us anticipated when we raised a glass or whatever, got some, apple cider at midnight on what became January 1st, 2020. I don't think any of us would have envisioned where we're at right now. But that aside, there's been some positives that come out of the experience. I mean, people have switched to largely working from home globally. And in some cases, that's business as usual for some in the IT world. In other cases, it represents new challenges, didn't have the infrastructure, meaning, the equipment didn't have a space to do that in, or maybe you're a data center professional. How am I going to operate if I can't get into the data center to cable something to physically interact with the infrastructure? And yeah, I can remote manage. Just curious though on what you see from a cross section of HPE customers now over halfway through this year. What's the sort of transition been like from what you can observe?
Yeah, I think it started with I would say a bit of a panic.
Yeah.
Over how do we deal with this, and I think HPE took a stand very quickly that, let's figure out how we as a company can help customers. And VDI became a pretty big focus of what our initial focus was, of thinking, okay, how can we help our customers in the midst of this pandemic? And looking at VDI and kind of making solutions available that would help customers with that. HPE also put a bunch of financing in place to help customers pay for it. So it's not, obviously you've set it up nicely. It's not at all what any of us expected where we would be. I think what I'm definitely seeing is a couple things, and I've heard you and J Buff talk about this not only at VMon but on this series that you guys do, that digital transformation. It's kind of been a buzzword that I think I saw a lot of people roll their eyes when they heard the term digital transformation, and maybe rightly so, because I think sometimes marketers grab onto terminology and kind of turn it into what I like to call gobbledygook. And I think digital transformation may have been like gobbledygook for a while, but the pandemic's making digital transformation real. And it's become a huge priority, I think, for customers to figure out, okay, how do we navigate this? And digital transformation is a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes I wonder if it's selfishly because I'm a proponent of digital transformation. And what I mean by that is I'm a proponent of Veeam articulating our value proposition in terms of a customer's digital transformation. Because ultimately, I don't know what every customer around the globe is trying to achieve. I mean, I can understand that they want to protect their data, but in terms of ultimate business outcomes, so I like to say that, well, at Veeam, our goal is to help enable whatever your business unit, companies, whatever project around digital transformation you have going. We want to make it better. We're kind of like I think it was 3M years ago. We don't make the couch, we make the Scotch guard that protects the fabric. We help make it better, but we help facilitate what your outcomes are. I think that's the mode we're in. At least that's what I aspirationally hope is transition from work from home, realizing, boy, this is going to be probably a challenging couple of years economically. Then we need to go further, faster on our initiatives, not sort of shriek back and hope that all is going to be well. You have to be bold in this kind of time.
Yeah, and I've heard you and J Buff talk about cloud not being a destination, and I wholeheartedly embrace that it's really more about how do we make IT easier. And that's certainly something that we at HPE have been embracing too. People have heard of GreenLake and understand what we're doing with GreenLake. That's really focused on bringing a cloud experience on premises, so that customers aren't necessarily having to retool applications. I think something like 70% of applications aren't really looking to move into the cloud. So how do customers get a similar experience? And I think the pandemic's actually going to help push that vision forward. I think it was Antonio last year at Discover said something that at the time I'm kind of like scratching my head and thinking, what are you talking about? And what he was basically saying, what he said is that by 2022, everything that we offer would be available on GreenLake as an on-demand service. And we already offer that today between us. Veeam is part of our backup as a service that we offer. That can be on premises, can be extended to the cloud if you want to have a cloud part for archiving or for DevOps, or what we keep talking about, these how else can we take advantage of our backup and use it instead of just wait for a crisis. And right. I think we're partnering to make that happen.
Yeah, just double down on that. If you're not familiar with GreenLake, HPE's GreenLake capabilities and service, it really, I'll misstate it and then you can say the right words, Calvin, but I'd like to think of it as it just sort of encapsulates what you may know today as an existing on-prem capability or service, in this case, like backup as a service, and makes that readily available with the kind of cost structure and economics and ability to roll out that you would expect from a cloud-based service.
Yeah, and it's a metered service. You can flex it up. You start at a certain point, and there's certainly obviously a commitment that you have to make. If we're going to put a bunch of gear on site, you can't have a one VM shop and use a 400 gigs of data. So there is a starting point, but we're making it really easy. Part of the last announcements that we did at Discover is having like these t-shirt sizes, small, medium, large. You start with the size that you want and you pay for what you use. And if you're not using it, you don't pay for it. And if you need more, it can very easily be delivered and flex you up to the a capacity that you need for what you're trying to do.
Yep. And actually, we've got a question for you, Calvin. It's going to be an interesting one because it's kind of a question more in my space, but directed towards you. And the question comes from Mehdi again. And so it's a question for dear Calvin. As we all know, storage industry is experiencing a whole evolution these days, but I myself don't see it on the data protection vendors as well. Is this something that we should be worried about? Meaning, I think there's a concern that there might be more innovation taking place in storage platforms versus data protection. Be curious to get your reaction on that, and then I can't help but jump in after.
Yeah, I mean, I think through all of this, and I did a podcast with Rick Vanover a few months ago, and it was actually talking about Veeam version 10, and we looked at all of the innovations in Veeam version 10, and you know those better than I do, Dave, so you can go through that, but just thinking about what has happened in terms of the array storage or your primary storage and backup, and you mentioned does the snapshots. That's something that HPE and Veeam have done together since 2012, and I can't remember the version of Veeam that was, but Rick was talking about, we were the first vendor to have snapshot integration going back to 2012. I mean, has the innovation stopped? No, it hasn't. I mean, things that we've done on the storage side, like you're aware of, I know you're aware of Catalyst, and Catalyst is an API that we use for a lot of our data management. We've now advanced that to have Catalyst copy with you guys. So it's kind of a small example, but every time you guys come out with a new version, there seems to be more that gets added, either that's a general kind of capability or something that's more integration that makes the integration between storage and data protection that much better.
Yeah, and, my answer to that would be it's a bit of it depends if that's the view that you've got, meaning that is there much innovation happening in data protection? Depending on your workload, depending on the environment that you're running, of course, service levels and other variables, you might be thinking, well, I'm satisfying my needs with what I've got today, or I'm keeping up at least with what I have. So therefore, I may not feel like the innovation pace is as rapid as it once was, or in other areas. I can tell you, we certainly feel very busy at Veeam. Version 10, as you pointed out, back in February was our largest release. This year will be our largest release cadence in the company's history. First half of 2020, already more products, either updates, revisions, or brand new products. And second half of 2020, going into the first part of 2021, is actually going to accelerate. It will be no exception. I do want to, and I'm going to have to get my cheaters back on. I can see you perfectly. I can read imperfectly. So our good friend Paul Stringfellow, who actually sat in your chair virtually last week, said, hey, continuing on the fine theme of last week's show, does Calvin have a view on the idea of developing specific data strategies? Meaning, like last week we talked about, how do you start or embark upon a data management or a data strategy approach?
Yeah, that's certainly a focus that my engineering team here has and my management team has. The platform that we talk about in terms of kind of where we think we're going and where we see the puck going is actually around intelligent data management, and the heart of that is having a data strategy, because that is something that I think a lot of customers need to spend more time on. And we're looking at that as a big area of focus. There's things that we're working on now in the engineering teams to make that easier across different platforms. But one of the big parts for us, and it's kind of focused on the infrastructure, but of course is InfoSight. And InfoSight today is really kind of focused on your infrastructure, but we absolutely see the need to help customers have better insight into their data and to make it easier for them to better implement a data strategies. And how do you manage this data long term? How many snapshots do I need, and how many copies of data, and keeping track of this so that they're not wasting capacity because they've got so many copies they can't have snapshot sprawl, and just being able to take a better inventory of what it is they have it in the right place, have it where it's it's going to meet the SLAs that they have, but also minimize the costs.
Yeah. No, perfect. Hey, and thank you, Paul, for the question. I'd like to encourage anyone else to type in some questions also. Since we did reference it, both HPE Discover and Veeam On have occurred recently. Let's take HPE Discover first. I think we've got a slide on this and we'll drop the URL in chat. Walk us through this. I know HPE Discover is the name or the theme brand of the very large conference that you obviously usually have in person this week or this year moved virtually. But I like how you guys did this, meaning it wasn't like one day, bam, all, hang on for 15 hours while we go through 180 sessions. Talk us through your approach.
Yeah, I had very little to do with the decision of how they did it. And when I first heard about it, I was kind of shaking my head a little bit about, really, we're going to, in fact, it's actually continuing this week, Dave. One of the things we announced during the first week that Antonio announced during his keynote was HPE Esmeralda, and that's our new software brand. And this week is HPE Esmeralda week, so there's actually new content coming out this week around Esmeralda. So they've made it into a multi-week event, and it started on the 22nd or 23rd of June, and here we are a month later, and we're still releasing new content. I actually now, in hindsight, think that was a good idea because,
yes.
I mean, imagine you have people captive at a conference and you get their attention and they're out on the show floor checking out demos and they're going to sessions and you have them at night going to, social events. But getting online and sitting through something for more than a few hours, that's a tough call to get people to sit for more than a few hours watching stuff online. So they've kind of the way we've did it is, they did the major announcements on the 23rd. Antonio did those in his keynote. There were a few sessions that kind of hit the highlights of the announcement. But then, like storage, we had our week, I think it was July 7th, if that was the Monday that week. Well, July 6th. But a lot of the content started on July 7th, and there was a bunch of new sessions that came out on the 7th. I think we only had 3 the first week of Discover, and then we came out with like 16 or 17 more sessions. And that's kind of what I'm highlighting in the blog post that I did. What I really like that we did, a lot of times, I think you guys use the same platform as we did, Entrada, and instead of people having to go back into Entrada, what we did is we took all of our storage content out of Entrada, and now it's actually just sitting on a website on hpe.com. You don't have to register to watch it. So there's now all that content that was part of Discover is now sitting on hpe.com. You don't have to sell your firstborn child to watch any of it, and that's what that blog post points to. It's where you can get to the storage content that sits on now our hpe.com storage pages.
That's awesome. I like that. I mean, it's almost like technical Mardi Gras, right? It's a movable feast of, duration. And to your point, it doesn't either burn people out or just unrealistically expect that people can dedicate multiple hours on multiple consecutive days for, any single vendor. And, towards that end, to do a quick commercial for our past Veeam On experience as well. I think we've got a slide on that. So one of the things that I like, I always look at, how can you make lemonade out of lemons? Again, 2020, it's been a curious year, but the positive in my mind for the virtual experience, especially Veeam On, is it used to take us almost a full year and 60 different events globally to kind of roll out whatever we were going to do at Veeam On, in every single country, every single theater, that kind of thing. And what I liked about it is we did it in just 2 days, or in portions of 2 days, but we did it 3 times. So we did kind of the Americas, the European theater, and then the Asia Pacific theater, and it made for a kind of a long couple days. But what I liked is we could get the information out to everybody globally within 24 hours. Everybody got to see the same demos, the same access to information. One thing I thought was kind of cool, and would encourage people to check out some of the Veeam On sessions, is let's say you were speaking and you may be giving your presentation. It might have been recorded. It might have been one of the ones that wasn't live. You, or maybe even myself, would have been in your session answering chat. So it actually offered a capability for people to ask a question. Like, I didn't understand. I haven't heard of GreenLake. What's GreenLake? and someone else, either yourself or a representative, can jump in and get that answered in real time. So I think there's some positives to the situation that we found ourselves in. So
Yeah,
I think,
and we did the exact same thing, Dave. In fact, I think I saw for you guys actually had East and West Coast, because I know being Mountain Time, I got up in the middle of that, and it's like, wait a minute, I missed the keynote, and then suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute, the West Coast keynote's starting now. But
yeah,
we did the same thing, although we didn't do East and West. We just did Americas, we did EMEA, and then Asia Pacific, where Americas was leading, and then between APJ and EMEA, they would get the same content. With Antonio did the keynote 3 times and was there to do it live for each region, and so they did the same thing with a lot of the big things. But like you said, some of it was pre-recorded, but the speakers were then online answering chat, which made it a really great experience. Like you said, we made lemonade out of lemons. I would much rather any day of the week be live face to face. My job is social media. I don't like this staying at home. I would rather be out at an event, but we did the best with what we had, and I think I don't know that our two teams talked to each other, but I saw a lot of similarities between what you guys did and what we did.
yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. Well, as we begin to wrap up now, I do want to call attention to a couple of things that are coming actually this week. So on Wednesday, I'm going to have a Veeam discussion with a co-founder of Netflix. We'll get that information dropped into chat. That's on this Wednesday. And then we're going to have kind of a security theme for the balance of the week. On Thursday it will be, let me get my 10 a.m. Eastern time, which should be, I believe, 4 p.m. CT time in Europe. So we're going to have our product strategy with Anthony Spiteri and company talking through security kind of more generally. And then this Friday on a LinkedIn live stream at this same time, noon Eastern, 6 CT time, we're going to have our colleague Jeff Reichert interview Veeam's Chief Information Security Officer, Gil Vega, talk through some specific things. If you're not familiar with Gil, and you probably aren't, Calvin, Gil, well, his stop before Veeam was interesting. He was the Chief Information Security Officer for Citibank, so financial transactions. Prior to that, he was in charge of preventing digital threats from the United States global stockpile of nuclear weapons. So we're talking about fairly high stakes type of things here. Very different, obviously, from a military to a commercial financial transaction issue. But his talk track is fascinating. So that's coming up later in the week. Definitely encourage people, take a look at some of this content at HPE Discover, at VeeamON. It's no charge. You can cherry pick, meaning shop, see things that you think might be of interest. If it turns out that's not the session you're looking for, no problem. Go check out something else. But it is an opportunity during this time to be able to investigate some things and do it from the comfort of your own home, because unfortunately we are travel restricted. Well, we're probably at a pause point, Calvin. At some point in the very near future, hope to get together live at one of these mutual events. Thank you so much for jumping in and our LinkedIn live stream. Really appreciate it.
Hey, glad to do it, and I appreciate you inviting me to sit in for Jay Buff. Hope he's having a good time. I don't think he's probably out on any Boy Scout camping trips this week, but maybe he is. I don't know.
No, he was meant to be, and then the plug got pulled.
I'm sure.
I think the challenge was, they were going to be fine once they got to destination and secluded on boats. And the problem was the transit. But
Yep.
he is getting some R&R, and that's a great thing nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much, Calvin. Thank you, everyone, for joining the live stream. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Bye now.